What is a real estate syndication? And should you be using a real estate syndication in your real estate business? Let's go. Hey there, my name is Mike Fritz. I'm the founder of Titanium Capital Investments and the Multifamily CEO System. My greatest passion is to help investors just like you create financial freedom through investing in multifamily real estate. I think it's the greatest investment in the world. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to create a real estate syndication. We're going to go through the 5 things you need to know if you're going to create one and make it successful. But make sure you stick around to the end because I have a free gift for you for being with us today. First, let's define what a syndication is. The definition is the transfer of something for management or control by a group of individuals or an organization. A working definition in the real estate world is a syndication is when a bunch of people put their money into one project that they couldn't do on their own. It's the idea of pooling resources to buy a bigger investment that we can't really lock in on our own. And a syndication allows a legal path to do that where everybody is protected. The first thing you need to know about a syndication is it breaks up the groups of people into what we call general partners and limited partners, or what we call GP and LP. General partners are the ones that manage the deal. General partners usually find the deal, they raise money for the deal, they manage the asset, they connect with the property manager, they're the ones managing the property. However, they also have all the decision making of the agreement between the partners. On the limited partner side, limited partners, it's much easier. They invest their money, they have no role in the project, and they don't have any decision-making power. Usually, a limited partner wants to just invest their money and not do any of the work and just see a rate of return. They don't want to be involved in the day-to-day or the decisions of the project. They just want to invest their money and see a return on investment. And that's where a limited partner really comes in a real estate syndication. But with that comes the inability to make any decisions. They don't get any decision-making power when it comes to the actual health and wealth of the property. So if a decision needs to be made, if we're going to sell or refinance, limited partners don't get to weigh in on that decision because they don't have decision-making power, even though, more often than not, the limited partners own more equity than the general partners. The next thing you need to know when creating a real estate syndication is there are 2 different types of funds under the SEC. The SEC is the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States of America. It's a government institution that really polices security exchange. What that means is when you're selling a security to an investor, they make sure that process happens legally and make sure you do that in a way that is really of the utmost integrity. Because in a syndication, when you have limited partners that are simply investing in the deal, you as a general partner are really selling a security to your limited partners. So the SEC steps in and they want to make sure that process is done correctly. Well, in the SEC bylaws, under Regulation D, or as we call it, Reg D, there are 2 funds that they allow you to create to do a real estate syndication. And both funds have some different nuances, so you really want to pay close attention. The difference between the 506B fund and the 506C fund really has to do with the kind of investors you can accept, having to do with accredited and non-accredited investors. An accredited investor is somebody who makes $200,000 a year or has a $300,000 a year income as a combined household income or has a net worth north of $1 million. You need to meet one or more of those to be considered an accredited investor. In the 506B fund, it allows you to accept investors that aren't necessarily accredited. In fact, in any real estate syndication that's a 506B fund, you can accept up to 35 non-accredited investors inside this fund. However, those accredited investors need to be sophisticated investors. Now, this is a little nuance inside the SEC law. The SEC law states they need to be sophisticated. A sophisticated investor is somebody that understands real estate, that might have a financial background. They just know what they're doing with money. I understand this is very fuzzy and very subjective. If it sounds that way, you're right. It is. However, you really want to be careful accepting money from somebody that's never invested in real estate before, because they can come back on you and say, I didn't know this was going to happen. I never knew that a vacancy could happen. And you could have a legal battle on your hands because one of your investors who was non-accredited was not really sophisticated, and they can create problems saying they never knew this was going to happen. So inside of a 506B, you can accept non-accredited and accredited investors. The power of the 506B fund is it allows you to raise money from friends and family and people you know that may not reach that accreditation status. Maybe somebody has $50,000 in their account, they want to invest with you, but they only make $110,000 a year, or they only make $75,000 a year, but they've saved up their money, they really want to invest in some real estate. It allows you to help those people invest in real estate deals they'd never be able to on their own, even though they're a non-accredited investor. That's the power of the 506B fund. But there's two things about the 506B fund you really need to know to do this successfully. Number one, any single person that invests in your fund in a 506B fund, you have to have a pre-existing substantive relationship with. That's how the SEC states it in their law. You need to know them ahead of time before you offer them a deal. My attorney always tells me it's good if you can have at least 3 meetings with somebody over the span of 60 days before you ever offer them a deal to invest in. I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV, so make sure you talk to your SEC attorney to make sure you're raising money legally. So in that fund, you want to make sure you have a pre-existing substantive relationship. They define substantive in that you actually have inner working knowledge of their finances, meaning you know the kind of financial state they're actually in. And that's a good way to judge if you have a substantive relationship. I never accept money from somebody into one of my deals if I don't know how much money they have to invest, what their 401k looks like, how much money they make, because if I don't have that information, I can get in hot water with the SEC. The second thing you need to know about a 506B fund is you can't generally solicit the project. What that means is you can't go to Facebook and say, hey everybody, just put this property under contract. Would anybody love to invest? That is against the law according to the SEC, because that's considered general solicitation. Because you need a pre-existing substantive relationship, you can't generally solicit, because most of the people that come in through general solicitation, we don't really have a deep relationship with. And the SEC is really trying to make sure you're not accepting money from people you do not know. Now we can move on to the 506C fund. The 506C fund, quite frankly, is much easier and clear-cut. In 2012, the SEC instituted the 506C fund, which is a really, really powerful fund. The 506C fund allows us to generally solicit our projects. We can now finally put on Facebook, hey, I have a project, does anybody want to invest? But here's the nuance. Every single investor in a 506C fund has to be an accredited investor, meaning they have to make at least $200,000 a year, $300,000 combined household income, or a net worth of $1 million. You can't accept somebody into that fund that doesn't meet the accreditation standard. Here's the second nuance to the 506C fund. Every single person that invests in your deal needs to go through a third-party verification company to make sure they're actually an accredited investor. See, in a 506B fund, if you're taking on more than 35 investors and one of them is accredited, you can just take their word for it. On a 506C fund, the SEC wants to make sure it's verified through a third-party, unbiased company that makes sure they're actually accredited. So they check their income, they check their household income, and they check their net worth to make sure they meet the status of accreditation. But the powerful thing about a 506C is you can finally market your project. It just limits the kind of people you can accept. Also, before I go on to my next tip, make sure you subscribe to the channel and smash that thumbs up button. This helps us get our content to more people so we can continue to help people invest in real estate just like you. Let's get back to the content. The third thing you need to know when you're creating a syndication is make sure you get an SEC attorney. Your SEC attorney is worth their weight in gold. Not only will they make sure you're raising capital correctly and legally, they'll also help you set up the fund where everybody will transfer their money, and they will create what's called a PPM, a private placement memorandum. The PPM is really the working legal document that creates the partnership. It's the document that explains that there are general partners who make decisions and limited partners who don't. It's the document that explains the nuances of a specific syndication. And the legal work of a syndication is quite pricey. A syndication can cost anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000, sometimes more, depending on the kind of firm you're using to create your PPM. The reason this is such an expensive document to create is sometimes it's 60 to 200 pages. It's a very lengthy document that explains what a syndication actually is. It's a very lengthy document that explains the nuances inside the partnership of breaking up limited partners from general partners. The fourth thing you need to know is syndications are usually used for bigger deals. Because the legal fees are so much higher and the work to go through the accreditation process and the work to file with the SEC is so much work and so much money, usually this is only used for projects north of $1 million, sometimes even north of $2 and $3 million. Because oftentimes when you do smaller deals, people just decide to put them in joint ventures and don't necessarily go through the entire work of syndication. But again, remember, in joint ventures, everybody has to have a role. It's not broken up like a syndication. When you have legal fees that get that high, that can really hit your cash-on-cash return. So a lot of times people will switch over to a JV so they don't have to take that much legal fee to get that project finished. The fifth thing you want to know is how do you split up the profits between the GP and the LP side of an agreement? Well, let me first say there's about 100 different ways to do this. The way I set up my structures is 70% of the cash flow and equity go to the limited partners and 30% go to me and the general partners. I break it up by 70-30. But let me also say this. It's also deal dependent. If it's extremely heavy cash flow and people are making great returns, I might bring that down to 60-40, where 60% go to the limited partners and 40% go to the general partners. If it's really tight cash flow, but it's going to get big over time, I might start off at 90-10. I might give 90% to my limited partners or 80% to my limited partners and give the rest to the GP. The goal is to make sure there's enough incentive for LPs to actually invest their money into the deal. If it's really low cash-on-cash return, they're most likely not going to invest for 70% of that number. They might need a little bit more. So as you split up the revenue, just make sure there's enough incentive for an LP to actually give you money. I also want to give you a free gift for tuning in today. If you click the link below, I want to give you our free multifamily masterclass. It walks you through how to get a deal under contract in 71 days or less. It gives you the 5 things that need to be present if you're actually going to get a deal to the finish line. I'll see you in the training.